Well, Patti, I was really excited to have Jeff on today to really talk about career in payments. We don't talk about that very much in the podcast, you know?
No, we don't. And it's really important. You know, a lot of people listening, I'm sure, are new to the business. Some of them are old. It's old hat. But, you know, you really need to look at this as a career. And there's some real opportunities out there that some people may be not recognizing.
Right. And then I really followed that up in the questions from the field and just talk even more about, you know, number one, should you consider being more involved with your processing company? If maybe you're an independent agent or a sub ISO owner, should you consider actually like trying to join the executive team, trying to really be part of the company as a strategy to make more money and make a bigger impact? And if so, how do you do that? What are the steps? And so that's really what I cover in the questions from the field. And then talk about the insiders report today, Patti.
You know, the industry dodged a bullet, so to speak, in Texas, and I talk about a new law there that I think a lot of people who might have been working there would be happy, who are working there will be happy to know has been codified. So
yes.
And our episode today is sponsored by NMI. For more information, you can go to ccsalespro.com/NMI. So what do you say we get going, James?
Let's start our interview with Jeff.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
Hey everybody, Patti and I are here today with Jeff Underwood. Jeff is the Assistant Vice President of Sales and Business Development at epsg. How you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing fantastic, James. Thanks for having me.
Great
Absolutely.
to see you, my friend.
You as well, Patti.
We're really excited to have this conversation today, Jeff. You know, we haven't talked a lot on this podcast about, you know, the larger concept of having a career in the payment space. And one thing that I've noticed as a trend as I'm talking to salespeople in the industry, even ISO owners, there's a misconception that the way to make money in the business is always, you go 1099 and then you register your ISO and then you build this team. And then, it's kind of this path. And as a consultant, I work with a broad spectrum in the payments industry, and I see all of these other people that are very successful financially and otherwise. And I just want to talk today about that path. And so we're really interested to dive in. Before we dive into the real specifics, though, tell everybody your story. You've got such an interesting story in the payment space. Tell us how you kind of got to where you're at right now.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I appreciate the opportunity just to share that a little bit. It's I would say maybe I'm a little newbie into the payment space, 5-6 years in the payment space. Prior to that, growing up in the retail environment, right? It was customer service focused, going every Saturday to work with my dad, and got into sales in my early 20s and kind of bounced around into some opportunities. And then most listeners won't know I was in law enforcement. I was a deputy sheriff.
Wow.
And
awesome.
You have the physique for it though, Jeff. You kind of have that look.
Yeah. My friends called me the big guy, it's
yeah, exactly.
like, man, as soon as they meet me in person, like, we didn't think you were that big. But long story short, unfortunately I got hurt in that industry and took some time off. Some of the time off wasn't by choice. But interesting enough, I didn't know much about this LinkedIn thing and got on LinkedIn. And, one of my main connections, the credit card space, kind of fell in my lap. So it wasn't something I searched for. It just happened organically. And next thing you know, I'm in the payment space and doing everything I could very quickly early on. People said, you're not going to understand this space for a year or two. And I'm like, no, I'm going to figure this thing out in 3 to 6 months. And so it just it's something that attracted me, and I'm here for the long haul now.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm really excited to dive in. So let's start at the beginning. It's always a good place to start. So sure. You came into the industry as a W-2 employee. Talk about the very initial experience that you had, and also, knowing what you know now, if you were coming into the industry again, fresh, right, with the knowledge you have now, would you have done anything different? Would you have started in any different way, or are you happy with kind of the foundation you got at the first company you worked with? So talk us through that initial phase a little bit, if you would.
Sure. The initial phase is, the term drinking from the fire hose, right? So many things coming at you, don't even understand credit card processing, how it works. And so getting into it, I think the biggest impact for me was the individual that hired me. His name is Chris Berry. And he was instrumental in my success early on in my career in a W-2 environment. And you asked the question, would I do anything different? At the time, knowing what I know now, maybe I would have done more research. But I think the key to this whole thing is relationships matter.
Right.
And that relationship that I, rather quickly with Chris helped me build my payments, foundation. And so I think that was absolutely pivotal. So from that standpoint, I wouldn't change anything because I had a really, really good foundation of some of the early on skills that are needed in this space. I really learned from him. And so for that, I wouldn't change that because it wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for that first move. And so I really got my feet wet and was able to build a foundation there.
So this is really interesting. So, I mean, it sounds okay. You built a foundation. I'm assuming you kind of started rising through the ranks fairly quickly, right? And so I'm wondering what you attribute that to, what tips you might have for our listeners who might find themselves working at a medium to large processing company and they want to grow their careers. What did you do that made that possible for you?
Sure. It's a great question, Patti. I think part of it is just who I was prior to the payment space, right? We all get a choice of what we get to do every single day, and it's what we make of that. And so, that statement, hey, it's going to take you a year to two to learn this space. I took that as a challenge. And so for me, I dove in 60, 80 hours a week, researching, understand what the company's platform is, the process, learning interchange, right? Oh, you're not going to be able to read a statement, understand what all those things mean for a long time. I was hell bent on learning that stuff in 30 days. So it was just the attitude of you can own your own business. It's what you make of it. And I think some people think it just comes.
Right.
I just chose to work maybe a little bit harder and longer than some others might not do. And so I took it as a challenge, and that's what I just dove head first, Patti. And I think that is what really set up my foundation of diving in, getting up at 4 a.m., studying when everyone else was asleep, then go activity, and then at night, recap.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think it's so important. I think you just can't overemphasize putting in the effort. It's the one thing that all of our listeners can do, right? It doesn't matter what your level of intellect or whatever. The work is always going to be the multiplier that you can use to multiply the effectiveness. And so I think that's crucial. And I think also one of the words that came to my mind when you were saying that, Jeff, was the word curiosity, right? Isn't that something you see like with successful people? I remember when I had the last time I had a W-2 job, where, everybody, it's kind of like, oh, you're going to go work at this company. It was True Green Lawn Care, which was kind of the stereotypical, dead end sales job. Right. And, I'll tell you what, I made a lot of money there. And the way I made a lot of money there was just like you, getting early, staying late, studying, reading all these extra books, trying to figure things out and just putting that work in. And what you find is, these companies that have a lot of resources, it turns out they're willing to invest some resources in somebody that's going to give them more resources.
Sure.
Right.
And going to help them out. So you're with that company, your first company, you start to grow through the ranks. Would you mind giving us a little more context before I get to the next question of what were you doing at your first company, kind of towards the end? Where did you end up? What was your job responsibilities like there?
Yeah. So at the end, I started as a relationship manager, then a territory, and then I was a division manager at the time when I left. Okay. So building a team in Northern California, kind of in our Central Valley area. And not just growing the team from a headcount perspective, but, developing and training them to be future leaders of the company.
Right.
And so that was my day-to-day operations. It was from a recruiting standpoint, getting out in the field, not in a sales role anymore, but just using those tools that I had to help develop others to go out there and be successful. And that was day in, day out. That's what I did.
Okay. So then at some point you realize it's time to make a move, time to make a transition. Yes. It's always scary from a career perspective because okay, I already know all these people here. I've got this kind of capital built up in terms of just my relationships. And then you decide, hey, it's time to make a move. Walk us through that decision. I know that's one that a lot of people in this industry, especially because there are so many opportunities, mergers and acquisitions are happening and people are like, okay, maybe I should move. I think there's a better offer here, but they're maybe scared to take the leap. Others maybe take the leap too early and they miss. So talk about that decision for you. What was involved and what did you do to make that transition?
Yeah, another great question. When I was making that, once I identified a few months prior to my departure, I realized I'm a big believer. You got to lay your head on your pillow every night and know you did right. Right. And there was just some things that were just becoming, for me personally, it doesn't, anybody else, but there was just an misalignment. And I almost left the industry. I was like, you know what? I've been doing this now 3+ years. I think I'm going to get out of the industry, because you see a lot of stuff in this industry, right?
Yep.
Not always the right thing.
Not
And so
nice stuff too. Yeah.
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 A leader told me, he said, Jeff, I want to make sure you're running towards something and not away from something.
Mm.
And that very statement, like, it caused me to pause. And it made me think, you know, I'm really good at what I do. And I know this industry, and there's good in this industry. So I could leave it, but then I'm always going to question, I wonder if I stayed, what would that look like? Right. And so that was a pivotal moment for me. You know, I think it might've been a question to keep me where I was at, but it made me grow further into my career. Let me research some different companies. And then I made a choice and I moved.
Yeah. And when you made that move, talk about, you know, how do you make that move? And, you know, you don't start from scratch. Obviously you want to pick up right where you left off, if not grow right into this new position. So talk about how you did that. What are some of the things that you took from your early experiences that you were able to duplicate that success at your next role? How did you kind of make that transition successful?
Yeah. Another good question. You know, I love you use the word duplication, right? I always say 1 + 1 = 2, right? No matter how you slice or dice it, it's always going to equal 2. So how do you duplicate what you've already done? So one, knowing the industry, but also it's the relationship piece, right? So I was able to easily come into a new organization, learn the back end. Before I brought anybody on, I wanted to go through the whole entire process. Write deals, write application. What's onboarding experience like? What's the support structure like? Now I can use those relationships and, you know, through the industry to continue to add and build onto the team in a much larger territory. So my territory was Northern California, pretty much had Western United States. So taking what I knew, here's some additional things that now are resources. Maybe not everything's white labeled. That's where I started learning more about integrations instead of just, hey, here's the boilerplate, fill in the blanks, let's go. Right. Now there was some new things that I was learning along the way.
So if you don't mind, talk about a little bit about some of the things you learned at the first company, you know, on your early experiences. You know, what did you take away from that made the transition to the new company? You know, maybe I know you kind of alluded to it, but maybe, you know, just give us a couple of examples of how that helped you build your team as you made this transition.
Yeah, it's I think the biggest thing is structure, right? Is like I learned the structure of the payment space, what it takes from get someone from point A to point B. There can be a lot of stuff in the middle, but I think it was a foundational standpoint for me, the curiosity questions, right? I'm curious. It's not just running in there and be the race to zero. Right. So there's a lot of those fundamental steps of you know, appointment setting right expectations. So I was able to take the foundation, which I'm so thankful for, right? I'm grateful for that foundation, but I didn't want to just stay stuck there. I wanted to keep growing and learn more and do more and not just stay, hey, this is my role and I'm going to stay inside this box forever. So I would say the structure, Patti, is something I really took, you know, with me from a training standpoint, how to help someone get where they're at today and move.
Right. Yeah. And then, I mean, that's really important because, you know, a lot of times people say, okay, I don't like what's going on here, so I'm going to go start something that's totally different. And then they fall flat on their face because they really don't have any experience with anything that's totally different, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, there was a lot of things in my second company I went to that were very similar to the first. It just was an expansion of what I've learned, and there was a little more pathways opened up. So it was this natural progression. And then kind of where I'm at today, it's, you know, a lot of those principles apply, but it's a way different ballgame now.
Right.
Yeah, I like it. So let's talk about EPSG a little bit. So you end up, you go to your second company, you come over to EPSG. Our audience, for those that don't really know anything about EPSG, tell us a little bit about it. You know, what was it about that company that really attracted you to say, hey, let's make this, move here to EPSG? What was it about the company that made you want to jump on board?
Yeah, I talked to quite a few companies, and, the one thing that stuck out to me about EPSG was the people. And I had this, starting my own, say, ISO, right? Where can I find a group to start my own company, run it the way I want, and have true ownership, right? Like there's the residual piece of our income, And there's stuff that, yes, you still have, but you don't maybe truly own it. So that was really attractive to me. Yeah. And what was really neat is when I first got into talks with EPSG, this was 3 years prior that they were reaching out. Hey, come take a look at us. Come take a look at us. Right. The consistency from a recruiting standpoint was great, but it was really the people, the EPSG, the first company, not first company, but out of the multitude I was speaking with, the senior vice president of the company flew out just to meet with me. And that spoke volumes to me. I'm not just a number. I'm not someone on a LinkedIn page, but they saw something. They were willing to come out and have a conversation face to face, That was the first indicator to me, like, I got something special here.
Mm-hmm. I want to unpack a couple things that you just said, because I think they're so crucial. When you talk about your experience of coming to EPSG and you talk about ownership, I really think a lot of people in our audience might scratch their heads a little bit and say, wait a second, I thought you were the assistant VP of sales and business development. I thought you're an employee of the company.
Yeah.
Right. And so talk a little bit about, without obviously no specifics here, but give us some idea of the complexity of compensation in this industry from an opportunity perspective. In other words, the fact that you can play a role at a company like what you're doing, where you're actually involved in the executive team, but yet you have some ownership and you have some opportunities to make serious, financial success happen. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you look for?
Yeah, it's, the intention of me taking this role, there was never the intent, right? It was just never the part of the plan. My plan was, hey, build my thing.
Right.
You're treated as a partner. You're not, it's right. Like they truly understand that partnership piece to it. But the one thing that struck out to me is their mission is the partner is their priority. It's not it's not the merchant.
Right.
It's the partner piece to it. Right. Mm-hmm. So as things evolve in that relationship, so I still have that ownership piece, but to help grow the organization to go impact others like me. Right. That might want to have that ownership piece. So, from a comp plans perspective, yes, there's still some ownership piece, but there's also, a great amount for someone like myself, right, that it might be searching to truly start to understand that, hey, this can be yours. It's not just the company signing an agreement with a merchant. It's you and the merchant now agreeing to have true ownership. And that was pretty eye-opening for me. So it was an easy decision for me to make.
Right.
So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. It does. And I think speaking to that even a little bit more to me, when I think about, if I think about my list of people I know in the industry with the highest net worth, the highest income, this idea that all of those people are independent or that they're all owners of their own totally independent branded ISO is insane. Like 80% of the people on that list that have the highest net worth, they are directly, in many cases, W-2 associated with a processing company. And so they're involved in that and they have their own kind of piece of it. And maybe they're even getting some kind of a salary or some, other compensation, but they're involved day to day in it. And so I think one of the key points I really wanted to get across in this conversation is, and it's funny because Jeff, like for you, the way you've been in the industry, this just sounds like the most obvious thing, but to a lot of those in our audience, this idea that, hey, if you really like the processing company that you're working with, and you have the background and the skill set of leadership and management and these other things, it's worth talking to them about maybe expanding this relationship. Like you maybe could work at their corporate office, or maybe even you're remote, but you're actually more a part of it. And what happens is now, instead of you all on your own as a lone wolf, leveraging the scarce resources that you have, all of a sudden you have a processing company with, tens of millions of dollars in capital backing you up, that's saying, hey, we want to help. What can we do? And all of a sudden you have that relationship working together. And so I guess my real question, Jeff, is this, when you looked at coming to EPSG as, okay, I can own my own kind of sub ISO, right? Yeah. Versus I can be part of the company itself, from a financial perspective, it's like, that sounds like that was a pretty easy decision for you when you realized, hey, I could be actually part of the company and leverage their resources. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well, of just kind of like why you chose to go with the company itself rather than just totally on your own as a sub ISO.
Yeah, it was, it was kind of back and forth, right? Like in my mind, I'm like, hey, I can keep going down this route and build something great. again, it goes back to the people. And, I think sometimes we're a creature of habit, right? Like I have this just desire to continue to help others build their wealth. Right. And so it was really, for me, it's kind of fighting this part of me that says, nope, I'm going to go out and do the lone wolf. I'm going to build something there, but also the attraction of being a part of even helping build the brand even bigger than what it is today. Yeah. And so that became an easy decision for me. Right. And everyone's different. And that's what's awesome about this industry.
Yeah, sure.
You can love it where you're at, right? And where you want to go, and you can design it however you want.
Yeah. It's one of the few career paths that you can actually create for yourself as opposed to having to rely on somebody else.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. I think this is such an interesting conversation for our listeners because my hope is that number one, there's going to be a lot of people listening in our audience who are the W-2 employees that frankly maybe don't get as much out of our podcast as others. And hopefully today they're going to say, okay, wow, this is cool. Like I'm motivated. I want to grow. I want to do something, right? And I'm hoping there's others that are going to start to widen their view a little bit in this time of merger and acquisition and say, you know what? Maybe I can bring something to the table that's unique that I could bring directly to the company. Like I'll give you one other, interesting thought about this, Jeff. Just a thought that I've had. A lot of agents I talk to that get stuck in this dilemma of the independent versus the employee role. What's ironic to me is a lot of times they'll realize they could actually make more money and be more successful playing more of a direct role in the company, right? But what really comes down to is they're scared of the work. They're scared of the commitment. Yeah. And it's like, well, yeah, but if I'm part of the team, I'm going to have to go to work, Sure. And it's like, yeah. And guess what? If you want to be successful as an independent, you got to go to work as well. So, I think it's a lot of times it's that idea of like, they don't want to put that commitment down. And again, like you said, everybody's unique, right? Like maybe their version of success, maybe is a little different than somebody else's. And I totally respect that. But I think, those who are looking to be daily engaged, I think it's good for them to kind of open up a little bit and see that. So, last question I have for you on this, Jeff, is talk to those who are the independent agents that are looking at EPSG or maybe haven't even heard of EPSG. Why should they consider it as an independent agent coming on board? Tell us a little bit more about the EPSG, value proposition to them, and then maybe follow that up with some contact information. Where would you send them to learn more about partnering with EPSG?
Absolutely. One of the things as I'm talking to independent agents and even some of these sub-ISOs out there with other relationships, what's standing out to me of why I say EPSG is, some people say, hey, already know the industry. Here's the forms, go fill it out, go do your thing. There's no like in the direct processor role where you may have a sales support. You've got a partner that's actually going to help walk you through some things. I mentioned it earlier. EPSG's motto is we're here for our partners. And so to have the support, right, to be able to go and sign deals, find new integration pathways, you don't have to do it alone. And that's what really impresses me. So we built tools, designed tools for the agent to make them more successful. We have a vested interest in making sure that our partners are successful. We want to give the latest, greatest tools right to them, right? That's just part of when you come on board. These are the things that you get. And it's been pretty mind-blowing over the last 3 weeks or so, the stories I hear, and I scratched my head going, why wouldn't someone put these tools in front of you to grow your book, to grow your business? So I think first and foremost, and I keep saying it, but partner first, right? EPSG, the partner comes first. The merchant accounts are a byproduct of how well we do our job. So we want to remove obstacles to help you grow your book of business and do it in a way that's completely transparent. You have the ability to look at everything that your organization is doing right at your fingertips, and you have immediate access. And from the feedback I'm getting out there, talking to multiple individuals across the country, in a lot of places it doesn't exist. They're on their own, kind of that lone wolf mentality. Mm-hmm. Now you have support like you may in a W-2 role, and giving you the tools and the technology that is just it's awesome.
Love it. So tell us where they should go to learn more. Is there a website or phone number, email, whatever you'd like to provide?
Yeah, so you can definitely go. You can obviously give me a call. I'll also give my personal email address, but you can go to join us at goepsg.com. So you can go in there, fill out that form. We're going to give you a call, talk to you more about the opportunity at EPSG. You can also email me at jeff.underwood@goepsg.com. And as well as my phone number, 209-814-6660. Be mindful. I'm throwing this phone number out there. I might get a lot of phone calls.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I'll return your calls within 24 hours. I promise.
Awesome. And give us that phone number one more time, if you would, Jeff,
Yep.
for those that are driving.
It's area code 209-814-6660.
Awesome.
Jeff,
And you can
great
always find me on
information.
LinkedIn too.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually how I found Jeff. So good stuff. I
Yeah.
always love connecting on LinkedIn. It's definitely the place for payments. So Jeff, such great information today. I really appreciate you taking the time to share it. It was a unique conversation, and it's one that I think needed to be had on the podcast with our audience. I know a lot of people are going to get value in it. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah,
No,
thanks,
thank you.
Jeff.
I'm very grateful to you and Patti for having me as a guest.
So, James, in an industry like merchant services where companies come and go, longevity counts for a lot, and that's why I thought it'd be really important to, point out today that NMI, our sponsor of our podcast, has been in business for 20 years, providing a payments platform that's not only processor agnostic, but is set up in such a way as to not ever be in a competitive position vis-a-vis its agents and ISOs. There are merchant services enablers, is what I think of it as, positioned to help other businesses succeed in the field. And, one way they are an enabler that I think is particularly noteworthy is that they bring all these value adds to the market, that can be private labeled by ISOs and agents and that really respond to the business needs of merchants, without the ISO or the agent having to get wrapped up in a development piece, they're easily integrated with payment processing, and they can sell it on their own. The one that really jumps out at me, and I think we've spoken about in the past, is the automatic card updates. Automatic payments has become a real important functionality in recent years. And when you have an enabler like NMI that can not only do these automatic card updates, but manage all the PCI compliance and all the headaches that go with it. It's really important. So
yeah, I agree. Good stuff, Patti.
Yeah, so if you haven't already, go to ccsalespro.com/NMI. That's Nancy Mary Indigo. Schedule a demonstration of how an NMI can help you grow more profitable and stickier relationships.
And now, here is Questions from the Field with James Shepard.
So, Patti, I really enjoyed our conversation with Jeff, and I know from being in the various Facebook groups that I'm sure I will get quite a few negative reactions to that one, because I continue to emphasize the W-2 role in the industry, much to the frustration of the 1099 agents that have decided that they are the sum of all knowledge and that nothing else could possibly be correct.
Right.
And so I just wanted to talk for a minute to those who were maybe looking, thinking about that. And they're like, James, I'm not exactly sure what you meant. So I want to just kind of dive in and give some tips about, number one, should you get more involved with your processing company? And number two, how should you get more involved if you decide that you want to do that? So let me answer the first question. So should I get more involved in my processing company? Here's the question. If you are a 1099, well, let's say you're building a portfolio, okay? The question is, do you have more to bring to the table than just your sales ability?
Right.
Okay. Now, if all you have to bring to the table is sales ability and that's all you want to bring to the table, that is totally fine. Believe me, in no way am I trying to say that that's bad. I think that's fantastic. And so that's good. Then the second question is, are you at a stage of your life? Do you look at the next, let's say 5 years? I think 5 years is a pretty good chunk here to talk about career stuff.
Right.
When you look at the next 5 years of your life, do you anticipate being fully engaged consistently in growing your career, increasing your income, growing your business, whatever you want to call it? That's part of your life. Do you anticipate being consistently engaged, or do you plan to live 3 months a year on a boat, or you plan to travel the country on your RV or whatever, which I know literally both of those things. I know dozens of agents in this industry that do that. Okay.
Right.
So if that's you, you're not a good fit. Okay. For what I'm about to describe. If all you have to bring to the table is sales, you're not a good fit for what I have to provide. But if you look at this and say, you know what, James, I am going to continue to be engaged in the industry on a, day-to-day basis. I'm going to want to take my 3-4 weeks vacation a year, but, generally speaking, I'm going to be working every day on growing my processing business. Then, and if you say, I have something else I can bring to the table in terms of leadership ability, management skill, a background in finance, IT ability, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Then here's the thing. No matter how much money you make, you need to start by removing this concept from your head that somehow your processing company is okay with paying you $20,000, $30,000 a month in residual income, but they could never imagine paying you that much as an employee.
Mm-hmm.
They could care less. It's money. They're trying to get a return on investment. And most of the processing companies today either just got bought, are just about to be sold, or they're trying to build so that they can be sold.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So to them, they just want to get their EBITDA up. Okay. We won't get into all the financial stuff today. Okay. But they want to get their earnings up, and they want to increase the value of the company for their eventual sale, or they want to increase the value because they just got acquired by a private equity firm and they're looking to, roll that over and make a lot of money off of it. And as a result of that, you can bring something to the table that can increase value, not just for your little portion of the book, but there might be things that you've done that are successful that you could bring to the entire organization that in a small way could make a huge impact, because you might have one, you might say, well, I can only impact this one small piece. Well, right. But, you figured out how to make your accounts slightly more profitable or have a slightly higher retention rate. Well, on your 300, 400 accounts, that's nice, right? On the company's 50,000 accounts, that becomes very valuable.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So what do you do if you realize that's me and I might want to play more of an involved role in my processing company? And the answer to that is surprisingly simple. Okay. Odds are, if you are successful already, well, step one is become successful at what you're doing.
Right.
I shouldn't even have to say that, but I will, just to clarify.
Right.
So if you've made 3 sales for your processing company and you're thinking about reaching out to the president of the company to offer your expertise, just forget about it.
Early. Yeah.
Yeah. Go make 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 sales, get whatever your level of success. But again, I'm assuming you've already reached some level of success here. So assuming that you've already proven yourself, odds are you probably have a connection already to one of the main decision makers at the company, the VP of sales, the CEO, the president, the chairman of the board, whatever it is. Right. You probably have a connection, or at least a connection to a connection of this person that you would want to talk to. And it's really quite simple. You reach out to them and say, hey, I've been really successful in the business. I want to do more. I believe in the company. I believe in the brand. I believe in what we're trying to do. And I'd like to be more involved. Can we get together face to face and have a conversation about how I might play that role?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
That's all you have to do.
There are so many of our listeners that need to have this conversation. And the worst thing that can happen is that you can go and you can find out it's not a good fit.
Right.
And then all you did is you created a stronger relationship with the owner or CEO of the company.
Because they know you care. Right.
Yes. And that's a really good thing. That's a really good thing. What's really going to happen is they're going to give you a lot of insight. They're going to give you a lot of tips. They've seen this play out with a lot of other people. And so that's a good thing. And then the other thing that could happen is they might say, wow, you know what? I'm so glad that we had this conversation, because right now I really need somebody that can play this particular role. Right. And so if you'll play this role in addition to your residuals, we'll pay you X amount. And we're going to give you this, this carrot of like, when we roll the next private equity round, or when we sell, or when we do this or that or whatever, you're going to get X as well. Right. And all of a sudden you can get a balloon payment down the road. You can get additional income over the next, few years. And by being really engaged in the process, you're probably going to make a lot more money, because you're having that structure and that accountability that you're working a lot more and you're getting a lot more done. And so I really would encourage those of you who have an interest in that,
and are willing to abide by the structure and
absolutely
accountability, obvioly.
Yes. Which again is not nearly as overbearing as I think a lot of people understand it to be.
Yeah.
That's like, look, if you're building a business successfully, I know this industry, we have a disproportionate number of people with what we call residualitis. They make so much money in residual, they just don't work very much. But for most of you that are building and growing, you're working 50 hours a week anyway, at least 40. most of these cushy corporate jobs where you're coming in from a position of strength. I mean, you're not like applying through Career Builder here. I mean, you're obviously very successful. They know you're very successful. They know you're coming in because you want to be more successful. If they're going to give you a role to play, it's going to be significant. And they're going to, of course, give you flexibility to do your vacations and have your time off and have your flexibility. But they're also going to give you an opportunity to really make some money. And I think that especially right now with the shortage of employees and, all of these positions that are unfilled, I think our industry is really looking for people that are passionate, that are saying, you know what, I do want to play a role. And again, it's one of the things about my job that is a little bit frustrating is that I know so much information about the industry and about individuals and companies that of course I can't share, from the consulting side. But I wish that, just I think about the last month, like I wish that I could somehow give our audience like a tour of here are the people that I've interacted with in the last month who are employees that are making $1 million a year, that are on track to get a $10 million payout in a few years, that are going to, this is insane. Like, and these are people who were in most cases 1099 salespeople that said, you know what, I want to play a more active role in the company. And they jumped in with both feet. In some cases, they even relocated. They're like all in and they're like, you know what, I want to work with the team to build the company and to replicate the success I've had across the entire organization. And it's paid off handsomely for them. And it's put them in a really, really good position from a career perspective to make even more money moving forward. And so I think it's something that should be explored. Again, is it the right fit for everybody? Of course not. But I think there's a lot of agents out there that have a strong background in these areas that really have never even considered being more involved with their ISO. And I think it's worth reaching out and having a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you can at least consider it. Maybe it won't work out, but why? It's sort of like, passing up a potentially really big paycheck.
Right. Why not have the conversation? And again, worst case scenario, you're going to have a deeper, better relationship, a more loyal relationship with the decision maker at the company that's paying you your residuals, which is not a bad idea.
Yeah, good stuff, James. Thanks.
Thanks, Patti.
This is the Insider's Report with Patti Murphy.
Folks, a new law just took effect in Texas that makes it clear that payment processing services are not subject to state and local taxes. Now, I have to admit, when I first learned of this new law, I was scratching my head. I mean, after all, the state already collects taxes, sales taxes, from consumers on their purchases, and payment processors pay taxes on the income earned processing payments. So what gives? Well, it turns out that Texas has a pretty broad reach when it comes to sales tax collection. The state collects 6.25% on sales of data processing services like word processing, data entry, things like that. And local piggyback tax, sales tax, can add up to another 2% to the tab. Pretty high for you people like you and I who are in Maryland and Pennsylvania with fairly low tax rates.
Right. 8% is up there. Yeah.
Is up there, right. Well, traditionally merchant credit and debit card processing have been excluded from the definition of data processing. But recently the state controller had begun questioning this exclusion, suggesting that card processing services should carry sales tax, according to sponsors of this law.
And I'm sorry, just let me cut in here for 1 second. When you say that, you're talking about sales tax on what? On the fees that the merchant is paying?
On the processing fees.
Got it. So in other words, as the credit card processing company would be a service provider,
right?
And they would need to add a tax as onto the fees that they're charging the merchant for processing services.
Yes.
Okay.
Imagine the headaches that would make for
That would be a mess.
That would be a mess.
Yes. Okay. Because nobody does that right now. There's nobody. State.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the thing. When I first saw this, I actually went and I asked a couple of accountants and lawyers. It's like, am I reading this wrong? I didn't think anybody did this. And they're like, yeah, this is a one-off. Texas, maybe they were looking for some new income, whatever the reason.
Right.
But, as the sponsors of the bills, noted, it would, if this policy had gone through, businesses in the state would end up paying hundreds of millions of dollars in additional taxes each year.
Yeah.
And as they insisted, decisions to create a large tax increase on Texas businesses should be made by lawmakers, not the controller.
Yeah.
Because usually tax issues are a legislative thing.
Yes.
So the new law, which took effect on October 1st, codifies that taxable data processing services do not include credit and debit card processing. And it lays out in pretty deep detail what's included in the exclusion,
Right.
which basically spans the entire payment processing life cycle and associated players. Capturing, processing, and settling transactions, acquirers, ISOs, and agents, card networks, banks, and just for good measure, they also threw in money transmitting services are excluded.
Okay.
And like we said, I mean, the consumer's already paying sales tax on the purchase. The
Right.
processors and their partners are already paying income tax on that.
Right.
So, like I said, that this is a situation that was pretty unique to Texas. Doesn't seem to be any other state where this is going on. But imagine the hassles of billing for and collecting taxes on every credit card transaction that's processed in the state. I mean, it would have been a nightmare. So,
Yeah.
it was a preemptive strike.
Yeah.
But it was a very helpful preemptive strike,
Well,
especially for people in our business.
Yeah, absolutely good. Yeah, I think that's great because that would put a lot of downward pressure on margins and things of that nature if we had to start charging
for
taxes
sure.
on the fees.
Right. And,
So good,
and
so-
not only on margins, but imagine you already have these merchants, squawking about the cost of processing.
Right.
Add a sales tax on top of that.
Right.
And
Yeah. Well, and especially in Texas, you had a 8.5% tax on a $2,000 credit card processing bill. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of money. So,
Yeah.
well, good stuff. I hopefully we won't hear any more updates on this. It's a
No.
done deal, but it sounds like it's a dodged bullet, and so I appreciate you giving us the update.
Sure thing.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.